Writers, I'm going to be teaching you a way to reread and revise your arguments. But first, have you ever played the game Jenga? It's a game where players start with a solid stack of blocks and then one by one pull out blocks from the base and then restack on the top. The trick is to remove blocks that don't hold a lot of weight and won't compromise the structure as much as others. But here is the thing, writers. Eventually, as the base gets weaker and weaker, the stack is bound to collapse. The work you have been doing, writing essays or arguments, is like constructing a building. Essayists cement together a variety of reasons and evidence to create an essay, just like builders cement together all kinds of materials to create a building. Without a solid foundation of reasons and evidence, your entire argument will collapse. Instead of a strong building, you have something that feels a little bit like a Jenga game mid-play. You're building the tower taller and taller, but without a solid foundation, it is bound to collapse. Today, I want to teach you that some reasons and evidence are better than others. Some reasons are stronger and lead to valid arguments. Some are weaker and create invalid arguments. We call these logical fallacies. To provide the strongest possible reasons and evidence, writers can look closely at their reasoning to evaluate and strengthen their arguments. You've seen TV shows where someone goes to court and his lawyer makes an argument saying, "My guy didn't do it, and I can prove this because he, one, has an alibi, and two, has a witness." And then the lawyer from the other side takes the stand and rips apart the first argument. The alibi was for the wrong time. The witness isn't believable. Lawyers spend much of their time evaluating cases and weighing evidence to get as close to a valid judgment as possible. When any of you argue about anything, you need to do this same lawyer-like thinking. And you need to do this thinking to test the strength of your own argument as you work on it, so you can make it stronger and stronger. Today I'm going to teach you some of the tricks for doing this. You might find it easiest to start by evaluating the arguments of others before you evaluate your own. To evaluate someone's argument, you don't just think about whether you happen to already agree with their conclusion. Instead, you ask a key question. You ask, how do you know? You decide not if an argument is your cup of tea, but if it is defensible, if the person has supported it in a reasonable way, whether or not it's your cup of tea. Researchers have found there are a couple of problems that one sees in many arguments. And if you know to check for these problems, it can help you review someone else's argument with a lawyer's eye. But instead of just telling you what the common problems are that make many arguments weak, I'm going to give you a bunch of reasons around an argument so you can rank whether those reasons are strong or weak. As you do this, be on the lookout for some of the common problems in many people's arguments. You'll see those problems in these arguments. When someone makes a case, remember you judge it by asking in your mind, how do you know? If the person's argument doesn't answer that question, it's not strong. You don't think whether you agree, but whether the person has supported his argument. Arguments that are invalid have weaker reasons. They are like the Jenga tower toward the end of the game, about to fall apart. Here's the situation. Students are gathered with teachers and administrators to decide whether students should be allowed to have cell phones in school. People spoke for both sides. I'm going to show you 6 different arguments that people made. The arguments are sometimes for and sometimes against the use of cell phones in school. As you read through each of the cards, make sure you weigh the arguments that they are giving. You may need to pause the video if you need more time to read each of the cards or to take notes on the weight of their evidence. Writers, I want to remind you that these arguments were written to illustrate common weaknesses in many people's arguments. If you notice what the weaknesses are, you can see them and then eliminate them in your writing as well. Remember to ask the question, how do you know? You might need to ask it more than once, following the line of thinking to the end before you decide if the evidence is supported or not. Writers, now I want you to look over the way you have sorted these different arguments and think about ways this work might teach you about common problems in many people's arguments. Now I'm going to share some of what I hope you noticed as you were reading through those arguments and sorting them. So, a flaw that I hope you noticed was that one of the arguments, tried to convince by talking badly about the people, not their arguments. Person D is doing that when they say that kids don't get it. It just totally goes away from discussing evidence and facts. That logical fallacy is called ad hominem. And I'm going to show you a chart of these fallacies in a minute. Another flaw was that some of the arguments assumed the worst possible outcome would happen when there was no evidence that they would. Person B did that, right? He went down a slippery slope. You probably also noticed that person A used a lot of loaded language when he called cell phones high-tech devices that cause distraction in cyberbullying. That's begging the claim. So I just walked you through the first three examples of these common logical fallacies. And then there's three more: false analogy, correlation, no causation, and straw man. This document is also linked in the lesson platform, and you will want to use this in your assignment for today. So you'll want to have a copy of your own. Writers, you just did some really close reading work. That work of reading over parts of an argument and really analyzing its logic is not something you'll want to save for reading other people's arguments. You'll want to apply those same lenses to your own writing. No wobbly Jenga buildings for you. When you find one of those flaws, stop, get out some paper, and rewrite that part. You might even find that you need to pull out fresh draft paper and start again, making large scale revisions. As you revise today, remember that tomorrow you put your thoughts into the world. So you'll want to be the strongest argument possible. Use all that you have learned. Okay, writers, off you go.